Hello and welcome along to another interview from the Honest Football Podcast, where we talk to footballing personalities about their careers in football, their relation to football, and just their general life and career. This week we speak to Alfie Burden, who's a bit of an interesting one. A former promising Arsenal youth footballer, unfortunately had his career curtailed by injury just as he was about to reach first team level in the professional game. He then moved on to another sport though, which is what we dig into today too. So he moved on to become a professional snooker player. He was also the world amateur champion as well in a year off the tour. And he's had some pretty notable achievements, including playing at the Crucible in the World Championships, ranking quarterfinals, and a pretty remarkable first ever competitive game, which we talk about today. So I really hope you enjoy the interview. It's a fantastic one for me as a football and snooker fan. And if you do enjoy it, please put a thumbs up on the video and subscribe to the channel for regular content on YouTube. You can follow us on all of our other platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And you can, of course, keep up to date with us on Twitter at HonestFootball3. But I really hope you enjoy this one. And thanks again to Alfie for joining us. Okay, I'm delighted to be joined by Alfie now, and I'll start, as I usually do for most people with football, and take you all the way back to your childhood. What's the first thing with football you remember, the first moment where you saw the game or fell in love with the game?
It would be remembering going to watch my dad play, really. My dad was like a good semi-professional player. He played for a lot of the non-league clubs. And, you know, from a very early age, I think any young boys that have got fathers that play football, like the first thing they do is put a football at their son's feet. And that was very much the same with me. From a young age, I had a football at my feet, just kicking about on my dad. And then Saturday afternoons and Sunday mornings, I'd be going and watching him play football, you know. So they would be my early memories of going to watch my dad play football, and great memories they were. Like, you know, you grew up in and around football clubs, and you know, all the other players, my dad's friends would bring their kids, and you know, we'd all be running around all afternoon with a football, playing World Cup and little 4 and 5-a-side games. So yeah, great memories really.
And then I guess moving on to watching as a fan, what's the first you remember of the professional game on TV?
My early memories of watching football really would probably be the 1990 World Cup, which I was really, it transfixed me, you know, that great run England had to the semi-final. And the whole country sort of fell in love with Gaza, and obviously like loved the way Gaza played. I also loved Chrissy Waddle, thought he was a fantastic player. I remember watching that tournament, watching all the matches at home, jumping around the front room with my dad and a friend of mine who used to come around the house a lot. So yeah, that would be my first memory of really being transfixed and really focused on watching football, you know.
It's quite weird that, because a lot of people obviously mainly focus on the club game now, but pretty much everyone we interview, be it former professionals, former youth players, or just fans or journalists, everything they remember first is normally an international tournament. It's really bizarre.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think where we're flooded with so much football now on the TVs. I mean, there's a million different channels where you can watch all the leagues, and you know, you can watch so much football at the ready. I think back then, like in the 90s, it was only really on BBC and ITV. It was before really Sky come into play, so we didn't have so much football on the TV. So when it was on, and especially when your country was on the TV, like I think the whole nation was just transfixed and watched it, you know. So I think that's a part to play where obviously we had less football to watch. So when it was on, I think like everyone just watched it, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess moving on, we need to talk about your playing career, which was unfortunately cut short, which we'll get to a bit later on. But talk to me about your youth career and being involved as an apprentice at a professional club. What was that sort of experience like then?
So my youth football started through a boys' club called Forest United, which was a fantastic youth football club. You know, we had so many great teams there, and I was lucky enough to be involved in a side which was very successful. And we used to win a lot of leagues and a lot of cups, and a lot of the boys went on to, you know, have good professional careers. And we was involved from a young age. Most of the boys who played for Forest United, we were involved from a young age, going into the pro clubs into the professional centre of excellences and getting the opportunity to train a couple of times a week at the professional clubs. So yeah, I was just like no other young lad who joined the local Sunday side, and you know, I had a bit of ability, and then you know, scouts were sniffing around these good boys Sunday teams, and you know, I was fortunate enough to get asked to go in and train with Arsenal.
And how did you find the experience of being involved in a professional club once you got to Arsenal? Was it what you expected it to be, or were there any
Yeah,
surprises along the way?
I mean, let's have it right. You know, I was only a young boy, so and I supported Arsenal, and so to get asked to go in and train with the team you support is just like a dream come true.
Yeah.
So I remember my mum used to take me. We used to get the train from where we lived, take us about an hour, 3 different trains to Highbury. We used to train in the JVC centre, which was adjoining Highbury.
Yeah.
And, you know, I just couldn't wait. Just every session, I'd be running in from school, throwing my school uniform off. My mum would do me a bit of food and we'd sit on the train. I just couldn't wait to get there. It was something I very much loved. You know, football has always been my main love. And, you know, it was just brilliant to have a childhood growing up playing the game you loved.
And I guess moving on, unfortunately, we get to probably the more negative side of that bit of the story now, which is moving on, having an injury. Obviously, I think you were at Swindon at the time, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, that's right.
So talk to me about that, because I find it really interesting to get into the psyche. We've talked about injuries on the podcast before because all 3 of us have had them, albeit at a far lower level. What's the impact it has on you, and what was your thought initially when you picked up the injury?
Oh, well, initially I was in absolute agony lying on the pitch, facing the turf. But no, I mean, I was only a young boy. I was 16, you know. I got released from Arsenal just before scholarship. They said I was too small. And, you know, you're going back 25 years ago. You're very much in an era where the professional clubs did used to like to go for a lot of big, powerful, strong boys to win them youth football matches.
Absolutely.
And I definitely didn't fall into that mould. Like, I was a very small lad, a late developer.
Yeah.
And I was a technical footballer, like a ball player. So I left Arsenal, and I was lucky enough Swindon Town come in for me, and they was in the Premiership at the time. It was a fantastic setup. I had a few options, different clubs I could have went to when Arsenal released me, and I was just really impressed, as my parents were, with the setup at Swindon. Glenn Odder was the manager at the time. John Gorman was his assistant. And I was very much a player they liked. You know, I was a ball player, technical player. And so I was moving up to live in Swindon with a friend of mine, good friend of mine, Boise Wise, another lad from London. They was going to sign the 2 of us. So we were sort of moving there together. And we was on a little mini tour. I think it was like a 5-team tournament. And it was the first game we were playing West Bromwich Albion. And to be fair, like, it weren't the best game for me, because in the first 5 minutes of the game, I got the ball volleyed in my face from about 5 yards, split all my lips. I had a big bloody mouth.
Oh, lovely.
And then 10 minutes later, I received the ball off the left back, and never forget it. I was playing as one of the midfield 3. Because Swindon Hoddle used to like to play with the wing backs.
Yep.
So I was one of the midfield 3, and I received the ball in off the left back, and I played it off first time with the outside of my left foot, and went up on one foot to spin out the other side, and the boy just crashed through the back of my leg, just stamped through the back of my standing foot, and that was where I, you know, unfortunately broke the leg in 4 places. So it was a bad one.
Yeah, I guess moving on, I guess the reason I've been quite excited to have you on here is because after an injury which forces you out of football quite early, most people move on to either a completely different profession, or they try and stay in the game in some capacity immediately. It's not often people go in and become professionals in other sports. And it's a sport I'm quite a big fan of. So talk to me about how you got that transition from injury, unfortunately not being able to make it as a footballer as a result, to then becoming a snooker professional just a couple of years later.
Well, I mean, I'd have to rewind the clock back to paint the full picture of that, really. So, you know, I was very much, it went back to when my dad was playing football again, the sort of obsession with the snooker started. It stemmed from the pool tables in the football clubs where my dad would be playing. I sort of used to stand in by the pool table after the games and just stand there for hours waiting for a game.
Yeah.
So I developed a bit of an obsession with this pool table. I think I was about 5 years old, and my mum tells me the story. She says I'd just stand there for hours waiting to get a game. So I just started playing a bit of pool at the football clubs, and like I was just naturally pretty good at it, and I enjoyed it. So my parents got me a small table at home, and I used to spend hours on that, like playing away on this small table at home. And obviously, you know, you do anything for hours. If you've got a little bit of a talent for it, you start becoming good at it. So football, like I say, football was always the main love, but the snooker was there as sort of a hobby for me, and used to take me away, be a nice sort of distraction from the football at times. And it's just something I become very good at. And I remember my parents took me to a junior tournament, I think when I was 8 or 9 years old. It was in Hemsby, near Great Yarmouth, at the holiday camp. And it's where all the young players from around the country would come together to play in this big junior festival. It went on for like over a week. I was only 8 or 9, like I say, and I was so excited to go and play in this tournament. It's quite a nice story, really. Yeah. And I remember we all gathered in the ballroom, all the young players, to do the draw for the tournament. And they done the draw, and I was drawn out to play a young boy called Ronnie O'Sullivan. And it's amazing, really. And Ronnie was 10 at the time, and he already had a massive name around the snooker circles. That this boy, 10-year-old, was knocking in century breaks. So I was thrown into the deep end to play Ronnie O'Sullivan in the first round of this big junior festival. And everyone was telling me, you've got absolutely no chance of beating this kid. He's making century breaks. I think my highest break was 30, which for an 8-year-old, that wasn't too bad.
Absolutely.
But I was playing this freak of nature who was knocking in century breaks at 10, which was Ronnie O'Sullivan. So I never forget, we played right over in the corner table in this hall in Hemsby, and everyone gathered round. There must have been maybe 100 people gathered round this table, obviously all there to watch this sensational young player, Ronnie O'Sullivan. And it was the best of 3 frames, and I won the first frame. So I managed to go 1-0 up, and I never forget, I missed a real easy blue. It's amazing the things you remember all these years later, but I missed a real easy blue in the second frame when I could have maybe gone on to beat Ronnie 2-0. And he come back and beat me 2-1. But yeah, it was just, so that was where it all started, the snooker. But then a couple of years later, I lost all interest in snooker, and just, you know, it was just all about the football. Yeah. And I didn't pick a snooker cue up, I think, from about 12 years old to maybe at least a year. I didn't play no snooker. Then I sort of missed it a little bit, and I started going back. And I was playing in a snooker club on a Saturday. Every Saturday, my parents used to take me to a club called Ealing Snooker Club, where Neil Folds was a resident professional. Yeah. And he started sort of saying I could be a very good player. He spotted something in me and said I could be a very good player. And I was always like, no, I'm going to be a footballer. But I was becoming very good. So it was a situation where I was sort of becoming good at 2 sports.
I guess it worked out well, didn't it? Having something to fall back on, knowing what would then later happen.
Well, in hindsight, it did. It did work out okay for me. You know, if I could do it all again, I'd do things differently. I would have probably tried to recover from my injury that I got. Although it was a bad one, I think that, like, medically, I'd probably be better equipped to deal with the injury if it would happen to me now than 25 years ago. But I was very much sort of sent home from the football club and left to get on with my own devices. But you know, if I had my time again, I would have probably tried to get fit again and go back to the football. Yeah. But that wasn't a decision I made. I made the decision to pursue my other talent, which was my snooker career.
And I guess moving on very slightly, I mean, I don't think there's going to be many players who'll say their first ever competitive match was against Ronnie O'Sullivan. So that's something that you'll probably be able to hold forever, that one. I think that's going to be quite unique.
Yeah, so I mean, I was only, like I say, 8. I think Ronnie was 9. So yeah, it's just amazing, really. But yeah, so I've known all them boys from a kid, really.
And then I guess moving on to your early years as a professional in snooker, and I want to pick one highlight in particular, which was quite early on in your career. You made the World Championships for the first time, qualified very early on. What was that like?
I mean, just going into my early sort of professional years, like when I recovered from the injury, things developed very quickly for me because I was only playing snooker once, twice a week, and you know the kids that were sort of winning all the junior tournaments and sort of being spoke about, like the Ronnie O'Sullivans and the Mark Kings and the John Higgins, the Stephen Lees, Mark Williams. You know, they were playing snooker 5, 6, 7 hours a day from 12, 13 years of age, even younger in some cases. So by the time I recovered from the injury, I was only like a part-time player, and I decided this is what I wanted to do. So I started practicing every day. I went full-time, and so yeah, I won the junior title after going full-time, and then I got to the final of the Great Britain under-19s, and then I got recommended to go up and practiced with Stephen Hendry. Neil Folge recommended me to go up there so that Stephen Hendry's manager could have a look at signing me. And I went out and practiced with Stephen for a week in Stirling at his club, and I obviously impressed them because his manager Ian Doyle signed me after that week, and I turned professional. I think I was 17 or 18, and you know, it was very difficult. There's probably 400 or 500 professionals at the time, and it was very difficult to make a mark in the game at an early age, with, you know, quite a bit of pressure on my shoulders. I just signed with the biggest management stable in the game, who was Stephen Hendry's manager, so sort of big things are expected of you straight away, and it took me a couple of years to really sort of come to terms with professional snooker and how difficult it really was, especially after not having a real expansive junior and amateur career like a lot of the other boys had because it was football with me, you know. So like I say, it took me a couple of years, and then obviously I got to the Crucible, I think, when I was 20. The year before, I in 1997, I remember I lost in the final qualifying round to Terry Griffiths, and I was absolutely devastated. And then luckily the next year, 1998, I went on to reach the Crucible. And at that point, you know, I thought it was easy. I thought everything was easy. I was, you know, a quick left-handed player. I was sort of from London. Everyone sort of dubbed me I was going to be the next Jimmy White. And I just thought things were going to come easy. And, you know, I started doing a lot of the wrong things. Got involved in some wrong circles, and I didn't live my life in the correct way. And, you know, you don't get away with that. You know, you get a lot of hungry young players, and it's a very competitive sport. And, you know, there's no doubt about it, I haven't had the career I should have had, and that can only be put down to myself, really. It's my own fault with not dedicating myself to doing the right things. That period between about 21 and 28, you know, I lived a very wild life. You know, we could sit here for hours talking about the mistakes I've made. And, you know, I'm not proud of a lot of the stuff I done in that period, but, you know, you can't turn the clock back. All you can do is affect the future. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
I guess one of the things I wanted to ask you about in relation to snooker, you talk about that moment of the Crucible. As someone who was desperate to make it in football, and with that being your first love, did you still have that passion for snooker early on? As in, did getting to the Crucible mean as something as special to you as it would for most players working through the amateurs?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I love snooker. It's not my first love. Football will always be my first love. But, you know, if you're a professional snooker player, the golden ticket is to play at the Crucible,
Yeah.
and I managed to do that at a very young age. I mean, it'll always be a regret of mine that I haven't played there more. I've lost in the final qualifying round probably 5 or 6 times.
Yeah.
But there's no more of a special place to play snooker than the Crucible. It was an amazing experience for me and my family. Took quite a bit of support there, as you can imagine. And it was brilliant. I was involved in a great match. I think I was the first or the second player ever to make two century breaks on his debut.
Yeah.
I played great. I absolutely thrived in the atmosphere. Unfortunately, I didn't get the result on the day. I lost to a great player in Tony Drago, 10-8.
Yeah. And I guess moving on a bit later in your career, I want a couple of backup questions off of it, but there's been quite a big change for people who don't know snooker too well to the way tournaments are run, to the way the ranking system's set up, sort of, I guess, taking away some of the protection for the top 16 and making it more of an open draw, like, say, the FA Cup in football as an equivalent. What's been the impact of that for you as someone who was outside the top 16? And obviously in the last 3 or 4 years, you've had a massive resurgence in sort of quarter-final appearances and things like that in massive tournaments. So what's the impact it's had on players outside the top 16?
Well, what you'd have to say is, going back into my early career, is, we didn't have a lot of tournaments to play in. We might have 7, 8, 9 tournaments at best. Yeah. And then there was a lot of trouble within the game when the game lost the tobacco sponsorship out of the game. It affected the game massively. And, there was a period of time for a couple of seasons when we had like 5, 6 tournaments to play in. You were literally like a part-time player. And I can only, applaud the job Barry Hearn's done since he's come in. I don't know how long ago it is, probably a decade ago now, where he took the game over. And, I'd love to be starting my career out now as a young player, because the opportunity they've got now to compete, there's 17, 18, 19 tournaments for the players to play in now, and good tournaments, the opportunities are really there for young players now to go and, they're trying to make snooker a better sport worldwide. And like I say, I can only applaud Barry Hearn. He's doing a real good job. We're stretching around the world now, China, quite a lot of different parts of Europe. We play a tournament in India. I think we got a tournament in Saudi Arabia next season. So Barry's doing a fantastic job. And like I say, I'd love to be in this era now as a young player. Although I'm not completely writing myself off yet, I still feel like my game's in good shape. I'm at a little bit of a turning point. I'm not sure which way I'm going to go with a few different things, but my game's still in good shape. And, I'm the type of player, I don't care who I play, so I'm always confident if I'm prepared and practicing, I can go out and compete with the best players in the world.
Absolutely. I guess you've got quite a famous record for being a pretty big break builder, very quick at getting centuries for a player outside the top 16. Is it something that you focus on in particular, or is it just something that came naturally? That?
Yeah, I think like most players in all sports would have strengths and weaknesses. I think there's no hiding my weaknesses over the years of like in my mental strength and my safety side of the game and things like that, which I'd like to think I've improved on a bit. But I've always been a very good break builder from an early age, and I put that down a lot to from a few of them young years when I was sort of 16, 17, 18. I practiced quite a bit with Stephen Hendry, and the amount I learned off him and the art of break building is just amazing. And Jimmy White, the two of them, probably two of the best break builders the game's ever seen. And so, if you can't learn practicing with players like that, you're not going to learn at all. So, that's a strong part of my game. I mean, I've probably made over 200 147 breaks in practice. So I think that sort of tells you where my strong point is. But it's never been a problem for me break building.
I guess the final snooker questions before we head back to football. Your favourite tournament to play in and the best player that you've ever played against?
Favourite tournament would have to be the World Championship, like whether that be the Crucible or the qualifiers, which I have to play in every year. Crucible was like pinnacle to play there, is unbelievable. But I'd look forward to playing in the World Championship every year. The longer format matches, I think all the players prefer and enjoy. So I'd have to say the World Championship. And the best player I've ever played, I'd have to say probably Ronnie O'Sullivan. You know, the guy's a genius. As great as Hendry is, I still stick by Ronnie. He's probably the best player to ever pick a queue up.
I don't think many people are going to argue with that. I want to move back
Probably
to football quickly and talk about your son very briefly. Because obviously he's following at the moment a similar path to where you started. So talk to me a bit about it, and I presume you've discussed it. So what's changed massively in the academy since you were involved in it?
I think the biggest difference now is with the academy stuff, kids are not allowed to play for boys' clubs and the borough and the county. Like, you know, when I was a young player, I'd be playing for my borough, my county, and then you just go in and to train at the School of Excellence at the pro clubs like once, twice a week, and then you play matches for your professional club through the summer holidays or any of the school holidays. Whereas now, whether it's right or wrong, I'm not sure. I think there's probably an argument for both sides, but the kids are not allowed to play for the schools and Sunday teams, etc. And the counties and the borough. Very few of the academy players really play for the counties and boroughs now. It's all geared around the pro clubs and getting involved in the professional setup from a younger age. I think there could be a happy medium with that, where could meet somewhere in the middle, and you probably find the right balance with that. I don't agree with they should stop boys playing all the other football outside of the pro club.
Great.
But then I also don't agree they should be playing for 4, 5, 6 different teams, because you're just going to burn these kids out. So I think, you know, if we could find a happy medium in the middle, it would probably be the ideal scenario. But yeah, my son's in at Arsenal. He's been in there from a young age since he was 6, which is scary, really.
I picked them up earlier and earlier, didn't I?
They do. Like, I thought that was ridiculously young, but I'm hearing they're picking them up at like 4 years old now. So
how you can
ridiculous.
Distinguish talent at that age is ridiculous. But
I know, yeah. But no, you know, he's a very talented young player, and you know, it's what he wants to do. So me as a dad and his mother, as a family, we support what he wants to do, and we trying to give him every opportunity to fulfill his dreams. But ultimately, it's down to him. You know, it's down to how hard he wants to work now this next 3-4 years, which should determine sort of how successful his young career is going to be.
Absolutely, and we wish him the best of luck, and hopefully he'll be able to make it all the way, which would be a lovely thing for you, I would imagine.
Hopefully, yeah. Hopefully, yeah. No, I mean, I'm very proud and go and watch him play like any father, you know, watching any of the children, whatever it may be, whether it be playing a musical instrument or whether they're actor or actresses, you know, we're all as parents very proud of our children. So obviously when he goes and pulls an Arsenal shirt on and I'm on the sideline, I'm immensely proud of him.
Absolutely. I guess I'll ask you a couple of quick questions before we move on to the big one. So in terms of football,
no problem.
Best player you played with and against in the football arena?
Oh dear. Best player I played with, I'd probably say Frank Lampard. He was, he was in our team. Played for him with 2 or 3 years as in our Arsenal youth days, and he went on to have a great career. So I'd have to say, plus a good mate of mine as well. I'd probably put him up there. He was an unbelievable youth player, Stephen Hughes. Sweet left foot, great player. So he went on to have a great career as well. So I'd probably say them two.
Fair enough. I guess moving on to the big one and the name of the podcast, we asked people to talk about their favourite football game ever. Now, I guess for you, you'll probably have one as a fan and perhaps one from your playing days as well. So talk to me about your favourite games ever. You can pick 1 or 2, just ones that stand out in your memory.
From a fan perspective, it would be England, Scotland, Euro '96 at Wembley Stadium. I went with my father. I've never experienced an atmosphere like it. It was absolutely immense. And to be there with my dad managed to get us tickets for every game in the Euro '96. Wow. Run England had to the semi-final, and it's something I'll always hold in. I have massively fond memories of sharing them moments with my dad. But that game, obviously, the goal Gazza got, and the atmosphere, and being against the old enemy, you know, all the banter that goes with that. It was, it was fantastic. Probably playing for my county is a game that really stands out for me. I think I was about 15, playing for Middlesex, my county, and we were playing Essex. Essex or Kent. I was playing against a lot of teammates from Arsenal, playing for their counties, and I scored a hat-trick on the day. I probably scored the best goal I'd ever scored. I scored 30-yard bullet, top right-hand corner, and it was against a good mate of mine, a lad called Lee Carroll, who was a goalkeeper. He played for Chelsea, and he was a goalkeeper for Kent, and I put a 30-yarder past him in the postage stamp. And I got 2 penalties, so I got a hat-trick on the day. So that sticks out for me. Obviously, a couple of games I played for Arsenal, probably one. I remember playing Charlton away at Charlton, and it was an absolute war. It was just kicking off all over the pitch, and we won 1-0, and it was a penalty, and I scored that. So, that stands out as well.
Few crackers there. And then I'm going to ask you one spin-off question, as it would be rude not to as a snooker professional. What's your favourite snooker game you've ever been involved in?
I'd have to say the 10-8 defeat to Drago at the Crucible. It's so memorable for many reasons, but probably because when he beat me, he near enough smashed the table up in his celebration. So it's something that'll live with me till the day I die, I think. But I must say this, I played him probably about 5-6 years ago in the World Championship in the qualifiers. And it was a big game, and I think I beat him 10-7. I cleared up in the last frame from behind when it looked like going 9-8, and I cleared up to win on the black, and I went berserk as well. I give him a bit of the fist pump, and so I got my own back. But you know, me and Tony remain great friends to this day. It's something I'm sure we have a laugh about when we speak on the phone or whatever. He's a great guy, Tony Drago.
Brilliant. A fantastic way to finish. Thank you very much for sharing your memories with us from both football and snooker. We do appreciate it.
No problem whatsoever.
Thank you very much to Alfie for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you next time.